what you said about emergence, I feel like we had so many of those moments, like, not infinite, finite, but like meeting you was a moment like that I would call that a moment of emergence, because what you did was you opened up a whole new world for us. Especially when I came to the Hollywood Climate Summit, I was like, oh my goodness, this whole world exists. And how do we bring this world together with our festival and make something that is so much more powerful? There were moments where there were people like Carole Joyce introduced us, but, we had other people bringing in different people who had never heard of. And then next thing you know, you're on a call with someone who made this incredible film and very much wants to be a part of your film festival and bring something to the actors or bring something to the storytellers. And those were all these like very powerful moments of emergence, I would say, along the journey, where something beyond the imagination was happening.
The uplifting part, actually, the rocket fuel, that's the special sauce in the whole thing. And not like uplifting and making you happy, but literally catapulting you together in places that all of us didn't even know existed before.
Welcome to the Earth Mates podcast. Together, we explore how to find your path from climate anxiety to community action by asking, who are you? Because just like any relationship, that matters. So get ready to be raw and real, but also playful and silly with me, Chief Relationship Officer Amber Peoples, as we discover what's possible through the lens of the 5 Earth Archetypes. Curiosity and subscription buttons highly encouraged. Welcome, my friends. Today we have a very special episode, but before we dive into that, I do want to take this moment of presence, of reminding ourselves, oh yes, we are nature. And so the way that I'm really feeling a part of nature is the heat in my body. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we are in the thick of the summertime, and we just broke a 100-degree heat wave that we've had for the last week. And it's been pretty intense. It's becoming less and less unusual here in the Pacific Northwest as things change. But our structures and our systems aren't necessarily used to it yet. We're in that process of adaptation. And so different ways that we've been helping both myself and others when I'm outside is reminding to have cool cloths on the back of our necks, because that helps our vagus nerve system, making sure we have electrolytes in our water, and even having fun, like dancing around, being a little misting fairy with different squirt guns. And so wherever you are, whatever part of the world, and thus what season it might be or time of year it might be, I'd like to take this moment of 5 seconds where I count silently in my head to just feel whatever is that ambient temperature around you, and how is your body a part of that? How are you connecting with that? And so we're going to begin that as I close my eyes and start the count. Thank you. And now today, as promised, we have a very special episode because we actually have 2 guests joining us today, and they are both Weaver types. Though by looking at their quiz results, we definitely have some interesting similarities and differences to explore about how that came to be the top one for both of them. And part of the reason that we're having them come together today is that we have this special event that they're working on together that I got to be a part of, and it is called the World Culture Film Festival. And I know that I was first introduced to them with the concept of the 2 reality TV shows that I'm working on. And because those are in development, we started quickly realizing, oh, this amazing framework of the Earth Archetypes is actually a place of connection because there's so much story interwoven into the framework itself. And so as we began talking with each other, we started finding some cool ways to add the Earth archetypes and this environmental element to this festival that has the phrase as its core, entertainment that uplifts. And it's been really exciting to explore this and get to know these two amazing humans at the same time. In fact, we got to meet in real life and give each other real hugs and eye gazes for the first time just a couple weeks ago at an amazing event called the Hollywood Climate Summit, where I was able to give all these great introductions to people that are finding the interconnection points between film and climate. And so today we're going to have a very exciting conversation that I'm delighted to have you be a part of. And so without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Sej and Anabelle. Welcome to the Earthmates podcast. And I would love to hear, what is your version of that story? And Anabelle, let's start with you.
All right. So I met you on WhatsApp as Amber through my very, very trusted friend, Carole, who is a well-known person in Los Angeles because she has helped so many filmmakers realize their projects or being part of the success journey. So you already had a high standing, and then it took me a minute to put my finger on what is Amber Steele? What is she exactly doing? And it went straight to leadership, because you took charge and you said, hey, would you like to meet this person and that person? Was very impressed by how we went straight to a level of trust and recognizing that we are kindred spirits and you going out of your way to elevate our event, right? When I meet a person like that, I notice instantly, because often people think about me, how can I benefit? But when there's a helper nature who thinks about how to elevate the greater picture, so that always strikes a chord in my heart. So and when I met you in person after, we were already in love. Let's put it that way. It was already signed, sealed, and delivered. As you said, when we finally hugged in person, everything was already done before.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And Sej, I know that you got introduced to Anabelle that introduced you to me. And so you have many layers to this story.
Yeah, actually, it was actually Carole Joyce who introduced you to me as well. So Carole is also a very dear friend of mine, and she mentioned your name a couple of times via text and via email, and then she introduced us. And as you know, things can be very crazy when you're directing a film festival, and this was like in the last 3 months of it. And so I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't fully understand, but then because of Carole's persistence, I had the pleasure of meeting you on Zoom. So there was a Zoom meeting between you, me, and Carole. And I remember I was like, I have 10 minutes. You had 10 minutes. And I was like, let's go right in. And I very clearly remember you talking about the Earth archetypes. I very clearly remember your passion. And everything you talked about for me was instantly like, yes, yes, yes. I was so excited with the concept. And that was when you need to have a booth where people can come and explore this. And it's so interesting what you do. It's so important, and it just makes it so fun. And so I remember that meeting very clearly. And I know that was the day when Anabelle and I, we would be integrating this in the festival. But then you invited us to the climate summit, which is so funny because I'm such an environmentalist, but I'd never heard of the climate summit, and you invited us there, and that was amazing. Being with you there, meeting Christina Mittermeier together, that was like a golden moment right there. Meeting Ellie Weinstein and all of these amazing people over there was like, oh my God, this is incredible, very exciting. We're like all looking at the same stuff. We're looking for the same stuff. We're all of us have same goals, same mission. And so that's how I remember my meeting with you.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for that reflection and those moments of new insights and giddy moments to hear that story from that lens and what's, a piece of what's going on when you are kind of that within that weaver role of really finding these tentacles and figuring out how to weave them into something much larger, like the World Culture Film Festival. And what is it? Because, there's always that journey of people that are creating things like frameworks as the Earth Archetypes, and figuring out what are those ways to weave into those larger things is always an interesting question. And so I hope that for the listener, you hear some interesting threads there with whatever it is that you're passionate about with your Earth archetype and with your climate journey, as to how you can find these inroads. And I really think that that's an exciting part of how we as Earth archetypes can start introducing these ideas of, hey, can you imagine how we could integrate the climate or the environment into everything we do, to really represent that ultimate relationship that we have with climate? And so thank you so much for helping give that insight for people trying to find that way to share their stories or integrate climate. And with being weavers, that is the major focus. Like, the verb for the weaver is interconnect. And it is very much this tapestry where you have this loom with different pieces of thread of different colors coming from different directions. And there's this process of bringing it together to create this thing that is this absolute beautiful tapestry. And so I would love to next dig into your Earth archetypes, partly because what's fun is, of all this first season, this is the first time I've gotten to interview people that have taken the new version of the quiz, where you score things on a score between 0 and 4 as to how much it resonates with you or feels like, yes, this is true for me or not true for me. And you also get to see your scores in all the different archetypes, rather than having to select between the 5. And so I know that that's brought up some interesting questions and some interesting results. And even Anabelle noticed that she had equal scores in both Weaver and Molecule, and was like, well, what does that mean? And how do I work with that? And so this is something that I'm actually really excited to ask you and have maybe perhaps an aha about the quiz is, and one of the things that I dove into to try to understand your specific scores is, there is a question under each of the 5 archetypes that specifically asked about how you solve problems. Like, one is, when solving problems, I listen to guidance from my body or intuition. Another one is, when addressing problems, I work to bridge gaps and bring things, ideas, and people together. Another example is, I solve problems by measuring and analyzing data collected over time. And so that was part of my way to try to suss out these different types, is by having a similar goal, like solving problems, but these different ways of expressing it. And so I would love to just get some insight about, when you were taking the quiz, what is it that made you choose the number you chose in these different questions?
I spend a lot of time self-reflecting. It's an important part of my daily routine. I get up at 5:30 in the morning and do my spiritual work there, because I'm undisturbed and I can prepare my to-do list for the day based with actually my spiritual insights I'm receiving. And, when I feel unbalanced, oh so slightly, I take great note of it. And try to figure out, why is this giving me this weird feeling in my gut, and what can I do about it to solve the problem? So that being said, I think it's an important skill for humans to become their own experts. I cured my addiction past with that, and it has been the recipe for everything in my personal life, to, when there's an issue, you become the expert and then you solve it, right? That's probably the molecule part. So if you practice that every day, and you see questions like in your quiz, right away, because the gut and the brain are trained to respond to the question, like for me, because I do it every day. So yeah, it's a mix of analysis in like head and gut. So, and I also know, like, is this intense? Is this medium? Is this important to me? So the different levels were like, is this really important? Or meh? The meh is like a 2, But things you know are 4. You know them right away. Easy. I think that's why the scores were so extreme as well, because when you know, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, an interesting piece of that is that one of the things that I can see on my side is how long did it take people to answer each individual question, aka how long were they on that page? And that is an interesting aspect too to see is when people take the quiz, I do warn them. I'm like, this is going to take longer than a Disney princess, am I? It's intended to cause you to think a little bit more. And I usually give people the ballpark of 5 minutes, but I think the shortest I've seen is 2:15 and the longest is like around 10 minutes. And so I do see that reflected a little bit in your Anabelle, that sense of you're really clear when you read something. And that shows that for the most part, the amount of time you were on each page was pretty consistent. And so I can definitely see that for sure for you. And I'm wondering with you, Sej, what was your experience of thinking through these questions?
Yeah, so I'll just start off with saying I hate these quizzes usually because I'm like, I usually dread them because I'm like, oh my God, they're going to make me think about all these different options and I don't know what the options, and I usually have a hard time answering these questions. But I have to say this quiz was really well made, really well thought through or whatever it was, because when I saw the different options, for me, it was also very clear. So that was like, I remember there were very few moments where I was like, oh, would I do this or would I do this? It was like, yeah, obviously this. And also, I'm also a fire sign. So I also have this little bit of a sense of awareness of self. And it's like everything is very clear and very, strong. I feel very strongly about a lot of things, strong opinions. And so when I was seeing the questions, it felt like there was a clarity to the answers. They came quite fast.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. And what's interesting is that with your quiz results, the molecule was definitely the lowest. And what's interesting about that is as I look at the time you were on each question, it's also in the molecule section that you spent the most amount of time. And so you must have really like sat with it and thought and really made that, no, there's had almost all zeros except 1 3, and so you must have spent that time to really be like, yeah, no, this is not me, but let me check with that before I actually hit it and send it on. So that's really interesting to see that part and how that gets reflected there. And also, I think a key piece of this is with the Earth archetypes, I have zero interest in putting people into boxes. That's not what the goal of this is for. It's more when we look at that question of what can I do, which often causes people to freeze, is how can we scaffold people to break out of that and get unstuck? My first career, I was a public school teacher, and we often talked about how the different strategies we would use was a form of scaffolding. As people are learning a new skill, how do you give them just enough structure to learn the skill until they can then fly on their own and create their own from there? And that's ultimately the intention of the Earth archetypes, is to help give people that scaffold to go from that place of climate anxiety to community action. And so I'm curious, with the Weaver type, the big piece there is about building bridges. And I'm curious to hear, do you feel like right now in your life, especially with the festival, perhaps that's the reason that one popped, is that that's so much of where your brain is right now as you prepare for this festival? Compared to Sej, I know you're also a filmmaker. And when I first met you, you were gone actually to India for, a couple weeks, maybe even a full month filming. And perhaps if you were taking the quiz at that time, maybe you would have leaned, and made metaphor your actual top one. And so I'm curious, with these archetypes and with these amazing different projects that you're working on, do you feel like this framework can actually help you be able to apply or look at what the projects that you're working on in a unique way that does allow you to go, oh, how can I remember that I'm a part of nature in this moment and include that in whatever way is appropriate for this? I'm curious if that feels applicable or if that feels like too much to ask perhaps of one framework.
I still have to understand fully what a Weaver archetype really is. But honestly, when you say building bridges, that absolutely is a part of the work that I do, even in my filmmaking, not just with the festival. So, yeah, I have to actually, if you could tell us a little bit more about Weaver, I would love to answer your question in detail.
Yeah, definitely. And so the metaphor I like to use here is actually a pretty logical one, because a weaver really blends these two sides of the spectrum of the full embodiment as well as the full like prefrontal cortex precision type elements of the spectrum. And so I use this metaphor that is a scientific term called ecotone. Which when two ecosystems meet, that's what's called an ecotone. It is this vibrant place in the middle where it has elements of both ecosystems plus ones that are unique just to that zone. And these are our most cherished places on the planet. They are estuaries where an ocean and a continent meet. They are that zone between a meadow and a forest. And what is that unique place where animals kind of dance in and out of whichever one is their main home. I find that a lot of weaver types actually really thrive with starting with this place of ambiguity, to be able to suss out where is the connection in that ambiguity, where is the places of commonality, even if we keep our unique differences, because then we can create 1 + 1 = 3 with the idea of emergence. It's this place of really finding those places of unity and connection, and creating something entirely different as a result. And part of what's fun there too is in the report people get after taking the quiz, one of the pages is a compatibility page. And it's, if you are a weaver, this is what you could possibly do to start working with a metaphor or a molecule or so on and so forth. And so I often find also having people dive into that page, especially when they have this really beautiful spread across their archetypes, like both of you do, is as a really interesting conversation point. Because then we can look at, oh yeah, this element of weaver really makes sense to me if I want to talk to this type of person, or I'm actually close enough to the metaphor type that I could do both of those simultaneously wherever I need to, or whatever, place that I'm in. And so does that help give a better sense of the integration, and more specifically the weaver?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. What this test is doing is it's creating a map. It's like a map for us. It's a guiding point, right? Because as a weaver, when you're going into ambiguity, to remember why you're here and to go back and remember why you're here and what your path is going to look like is such a great, like, poof, it just makes you feel like, okay, I can do this. And it becomes a support system in a way to understand that. I love understanding types, archetypes. And for me, the climate archetypes was something that I had never heard of before. So I'm still trying to understand them fully, which is why, it's a little bit vague to me. But I was reading up on them after the test, and it just feels like it's such an incredible map to know what kind of work you should be doing in the world if you're not already doing it. And if you are doing it, it becomes a support system and a guidance to keep going. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Sej. I appreciate that. Anabelle, do you want to add anything, or should we jump to the next question?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of self-analysis, as I said in the beginning, and anything that helps people to analyze themselves, is a greater pathway to being non-judgmental within the world. You don't have to get triggered if people behave in a different way, because you can map it out. And it all starts with the self-awareness. Why am I getting triggered right now? Why am I freezing up? So I love that it's a new way of describing personality types as you integrated the ecosystem, what you described there with the tone, the ecotone. I think our festival is a very ecotony festival because we are very nurturing. We are very open-minded to allow complete culture clashes, right? Because if you have many cultures, of course, there's culture clash, because you're dealing with religions, you're dealing with political differences, with activism that go all sorts of ways. So we are right there, where us with a understanding of that ecotone we know what to do, how to hear out, how to be open, but also how to, make something like retreat again if it's destroying something else. So it's a very exciting place to be. And the bridge building is actually one of our mottos for the festival, because we want to be a place for everyone, which we feel is so missing, because we have those many clashes nowadays where people stop talking the moment they get triggered, and then you have camps, and then there's the desert, and there, is the ocean, and in the middle is a Grand Canyon of hatred and prejudice. So I identify very much with it. I think it's great to appeal to everyone, because it's not like a zodiac. It's about the Mother Earth that we live on. So who can't identify with that,
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And I love that as a weaver, you really stretch that analogy of the ecotone by talking about the ocean and the continent, and what happens if we have the Grand Canyon, and if we actually followed nature, we would have an estuary, which is this beautiful ecotone rather than divisive one. And so that's, I think, a big part of the earth archetypes is just I compare it a lot to love languages, because with love languages, we were really introduced to the idea of, oh, wow, you might love or express love differently than I do. And that's cool. But then how do we find compatibility there? And so with the earth archetypes, there's something similar, which is, how do we experience belonging, or this expression of being nature, and really just introducing that as a way to kind of rethink of that, or remember that when we're looking at these things like these political or cultural divides that you're talking about. And that's actually the next thing I wanted to dive into with the festival. Was you were talking about, all these different groups that you're bringing together, and how you can have them work together in community and across differences. And I think even the slogan itself has this really interesting two pieces that are coming together, which is entertainment that uplifts. So much of our entertainment these days is violence or gore or true crime, or these things that feed our perhaps an adrenaline rush or a dopamine rush, or some other part of us that taps into that fear response. And I really love that you had such a clear focus on how do we celebrate entertainment that uplifts. And I'm curious, as you're going through this inaugural year of creating the World Culture Film Festival, how is that going for you? It is my understanding that with the environment, that was in particular an issue, where so many of the stories are stories that highlight the challenges, which is important. We need to know the challenges so that we can use these strengths to solve them. But where is the hope? We also need those stories so that we have the energy and the optimism to move forward. And so I'm curious if you can help highlight what it's been like to try to bring together those two pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to find entertainment that uplifts. We went through so many movies, and that's not the stuff that sells. And what we heard from a lot of the filmmakers is, even if filmmakers are passionate about stuff that they want to make that is uplifting in content, there is no place for their projects to rest. That's not what the distributors are looking for. That's not what the world is looking for. And so I feel like there are people out there who want to make stuff like that, but they're discouraged, because what's the point? One of the things I want to quickly digress and share is, after speaking to so many different documentary filmmakers for the sake of this festival, I realized it's not easy being a documentarian. Here you are taking a topic that you're so passionate about that no one else cares about. No one else is not no one else cares about. I mean, no one else cares whether you make it or not. You're the one putting all your time and your effort and money and everything. And then at the end of it, if it's not going to have a place to rest, it is very disheartening. And so to come back to the topic, I want to say that there needs to be more spaces where films like these can rest, because if we do have spaces like this, people are going to make films like these. And this is what we really need in the world right now. because there's just too much information out there that is disheartening, it's dark. And the reality is there is hope. Absolutely. We have the power as human beings to make the changes we need to make. And we need to tell stories like that. We need to tell stories like that, and we need to show stories like that. So the responsibility lies on both sides, not just the filmmakers.
Yeah. So when you talk about both sides, am I hearing the filmmakers and the distributors?
Correct. The distributors, the audience, people who view stuff like that. So yeah, everyone on the other side, the receiving end of the film.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really interesting, that piece of when we're provided the options, when we're sitting down to, let's say it's our computer or our TV, or we're looking at the list of movies that are going to be at the theater nearby. What is that within us that is making that choice? Like, I actually have a friend who wanted to bring everybody to the like $6 movie night as part of this like birthday week-long celebration that she's doing. And she said that unfortunately, all 3 of the movies out right now that she wants to watch, all of them are horror in some form or another. And she recognizes that there's friends like me who will refuse to sit through a horror movie. I find that is such a stark example of what you're saying, Sej, which is that's all that there is for the choice right now. And so I'm curious, either from Sej or Anabelle, what do you think there is about this process of bringing us as an audience to this place where we're excited and interested to watch a story that is uplifting?
Right. It's definitely the road less traveled, right? It's so much harder to be kind, forgiving, patient, thoughtful, and not, once you like had an epiphany, turn into the echo chamber, blasting your opinion, and everybody has to just like accept it, because that's never going to happen. But sex, drugs, and rock and roll sell. It's just a fact, because the innate human feelings and the film industry has been nurturing that type of narrative. Social media with the swipe, 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 online dating, it leaves an imprint. That's why entertainment, the sacred art of storytelling, is a valuable good that all of us have to protect, that it doesn't go further and further and further. And it is a collaborative between the creators, educating one another, reminding one another of why we started doing this, and not just go with the flow. It's much easier to kill somebody than to keep them alive, right? Because, and that's what the movie thing is, right? You got people's attention, versus a well-crafted story takes so much more time. And if you talk about something difficult, you have to go the extra mile to think about the enemies, right, that you're talking about, because ideally you want to turn those enemies into your audience to be inspired to maybe think about what you're trying to tell them, right? It's like Christian movies, for example. They fail because they're made for Christians, and there's festivals dedicated, and they don't travel, even though they so want to. It's because it's blasting one particular story that is offensive to other religions to start with. And you can go through the different genres this way. I also want to add here that we just already, with our festival, what is a difference is that we don't make a distinction between fiction and between documentary, because in the end of the day, all of them are storytellers, and we have masters of storytelling, right? Like Academy winning producers and writers that have so much to say about how to craft a story for all, that documentary filmmakers can integrate, and it's not the big thing, it's the little stuff actually, where you can leave that particular thing out of your story, where you lose a whole big chunk of the audience that should listen to it most, right? So yeah, I'm very proud that we are creating this. And in that sense, the film festival, what we are doing, I perceive it actually more as a movement as well, or the beginning of a movement. And it's not just us. There's other wonderful film festivals that have probably weavers at the helm, where we just want to gather a community and remind one another of the amazing opportunity we have, with like, hey, entertainment that uplifts. We know it's an extra mile, but it's so worth it, because this whole swipe, 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 gore, 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 we can create the antidote for this. But if we don't do it, it's not going to happen. We have to, it's a conscious, constant effort like keeping a beautiful garden alive. If you just take your hands off, the sun scorches it, it's dead. You gotta water, you gotta nurture, you gotta, get the community together, everybody chipping in to keep it alive and growing. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, Sej, do you have more to share on that? Because I know that my memory of this is that you were part of this movement and the original festival that influenced the film festival, and you found Anabelle as this wonderful co-producer with you to have add that element. So I'm wondering, with this theme, was that already in existence at the very genesis of the idea, or did that come along after Anabelle was already a part of it and you co-created that?
So Anabelle and I came together, we were brought together to help create this festival. And Anabelle has her own festival, and I have been I've been on the board of like another festival in LA right now, which is an very solely indigenous based festival. And so that was something that I had never seen before. It was, it's when you see indigenous stories, they are so stark. There's such a stark difference between the other stories and indigenous stories. There's you have to see it to believe it. There's just always this inherent connection with nature. There's all this like stuff that we have forgotten that is very much embedded in the stories. And so Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar is if I would say it in Native American terms, he's essentially a wisdom keeper. Of the ancient Vedic tradition, which is, I would say, over 5,000 years old, even more, but I don't want to be quoted because I could be wrong. But it's very, very old, the ancient Vedic tradition. And so when, what happens with wisdom keepers is they attract the people, and the people they want to, bring people together. Everything works on an energetic plane. And so when Anabelle and I came together to start to kind of really create this film festival, we had come together with very similar ideas. As Anabelle was sharing earlier, she has her own routine in the morning. She has this very spiritual, she's a very spiritual person. I'm a very spiritual person. And we came together and we just knew that this film festival was going to be something that was going to reflect Gurudev's vision, which is a world of nonviolence, a world that has people that are happy and that are satisfied, and that the environment is taken care of, and indigenous people are respected, and everybody is respected, and differences are celebrated. And so that's his vision. That's the work he does around the world. And, 180 countries, there are 500 million people who have been impacted positively. So when we came together, we already had all of this. That was kind of the umbrella. And then this was like the natural direction to go for us. That was, this was something that both Anabelle and I personally believe in and live. And then there was this beautiful inspiration, this amazing humanitarian who we're extremely inspired by. So that's how it all came about.
Yeah, amazing. In this first season of the podcast, I've done 3 solo episodes where they're kind of 15-minute mixes of TED Talk and folkloric storytelling. And the one that I have yet to release, that I will in a couple weeks, is this difference between looking at the Western storyline, which really there's only 6 different versions, and they all center on the same word, which is versus. This versus that. Human versus self, human versus society. And one of them also, of course, is human versus nature. And one of the things that I challenge in this final solo episode that's going to get released is it possible to replace the word versus with with? Could we still have good stories, exciting stories, entertaining stories with stakes and changes and ahas if we look at this idea of with and together. And one of the places that, as you hinted at, Sej, is looking at the stories of indigenous cultures, whether it's traditions that are still alive and well, or ones that have been lost, and some that we're refinding, like from my own ancestry, which is the Scottish realms. We're starting to kind of refine some of those stories and some of those traditions that do incorporate this really interesting way of replacing verses with something else. And so I really resonate with that, and I'm really excited to experience the full breadth of the festival coming up and seeing that play out. And so as we're getting closer to the end of this, one of the things that I do want to talk about that's really important within the framework of the Earth archetypes, that I think really feeds into this idea that you've both been sharing around audiences and uplifting and storytelling, is this idea of reciprocal relationships. The person who kind of made it a cultural phenomenon was Robin Wall Kimmerer through her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. But it's definitely not a new concept. It's a concept that's been around in all of these earth-based traditions for a very long time. But I'm curious, in this more modern sense, where we're dealing with things like this recording session that we're doing right now, or you both mentioned that we met on like WhatsApp and Zoom, as we're integrating these things, or we're building these modern festivals, or we're just living our daily lives. How do you see, especially from this Weaver point of view about, building bridges and finding these ecotones, how do you actualize reciprocal relationships? And that could be with fellow humans, that could be with other elements of nature like plants or animals or the elements. But I'm curious what more you can share about that.
For me, it's listening and taking my time, because I love everyone right away and instantly. But is that healthy? No, because often, you love damaged people who don't know how to reciprocate. So giving it time and knowing your boundaries is important. Giving people the benefit of the doubt. I do that for a long time until I have a clear indication that somebody is so troubled that they're only looking out really for themselves, because they obviously have reasons for that. But I cannot join a sinking ship, like I want to create big vessels for a lot of people that stay afloat and are safe. So, and then there's the gut instinct as well. But I do believe in the innate goodness of people, and that with a little patience, sometimes you can facilitate a profound change in somebody if you just give it time and nurture and don't judge. Yeah, but for the reciprocators, I think with you usually notice very fast when somebody is looking out for you without knowing you. It's like a bing, 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 a big light bulb going off. So, how refreshing. It's like being on the mountaintop. Hey, over there. You see each other clearly and want to be in touch with each other. And the others you figure out just with time and patience. And if they're dangerous and hazardous, you don't go too far to put yourself in danger.
Yeah, so I hear that sense of listening. There is that first initial response, but then there's also listening for, well, what, and that kind of, it sounds like came from you, but then there's also the listening of what's coming back. And it makes me think of part of what I'm doing to really nurture my sense of reciprocity is I've started to actually connect with somebody who is a reverend within the Druid community, because that's, once again, a part of my ancestry. And within the Druid community, he's actually considered the expert in reciprocal relationships. And the phrase that he uses and actually built an entire book around was, I give so that you can give, or we give so that they can give. And so what I hear, Anabelle, is you're willing to start from that place and do it for a long enough time that you have the chance to see what you can listen to in return. And then there becomes this point of of a decision that keeps you healthy in that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Sej, do you have more to add on the idea of reciprocal relationships?
Yeah. I mean, I think reciprocal relationships it's the foundation of humanity and everything, every living being on this planet. And it's something that has been forgotten at the very basis, and that reflects in everything that you see around you, in all the businesses and everything. We've just become a pretty selfish species. And so one of the things that, so on a bigger scale, yes, reciprocal relationships is something that Indigenous communities are always reminding us about. But one of the things for the festival that Anabelle and I are doing very, very consciously and intentionally is that where everyone that we've brought on board, we have brought them on board to see what they want to bring to the table rather than what we want from them. So everyone we've invited, it has never been with our agenda. It has really, yes, the festival has to be cohesive. There has to be a theme. But when you go with that kind of a mindset, naturally, when you tell them what the theme of the festival is, and you go to a person and you tell them, what would you like to bring? What is it that your voice really needs a platform for? Or what is it that your heart is dying to share with the world? Bring that, because we want this festival to be a heart-filled festival that comes from a very beautiful and pure place. And that has been so rewarding so far. So that's something. And then another thing is we want to try to make it as sustainable as we can, even in the inaugural year with the limited, funds that we have. So we're going to try to keep it reciprocal in every sense of the word, to the best of our ability.
That kind of actually brings us back to the very beginning, just that encouragement, once again, for people listening to keep that in mind, of using this sense of reciprocal relationships to show how can you show up with this desire to have this relationship with the climate, to introduce it to folks like yourself that are doing projects like this. Two more questions that I want to ask, and one of them is this idea of emergence, which I've hinted at already. It was really interesting for me when I learned the physics behind emergence. And it really kind of boils down to this mathematical equation, which is 1 + 1 = 3. And what happens in that is it's also a way to describe a style of evolution, where you have these two things that are kind of sort of around each other, but then as they get closer, they start kind of this more frenetic energy, and they're kind of they're starting to affect one another as they're bouncing up against the world that is. And then at a certain point, if we're looking at it as if we're looking at a graph, the pencil literally leaves the page and moves to a whole new section of the graph. And that's the really interesting part of the physics, is that there is this leap that happens that is kind of unexplainable. Still, even from the science that we know. But as a metaphor type, I relied on it to make things happen. And as we talk about the embodiment types, that's a huge part of that world, where it's a physical embodiment, an instinctual embodiment of things that maybe can't even put into words. And so I'm curious if you can give an example where you feel like you've experienced that with this festival. Maybe it has to do with some of these things we've been talking about with the environment and climate, or maybe a whole nother thing. But this example where, as you welcomed in people's ideas, you created something even more fabulous than you first thought it could be.
It's a secret to a happy life, like where there are two or more gathered. It is an energetic, the power of aligned kindred spirits that create that extra push, the energy in the invisible realm, right? Besides those two heads and 4 arms. So that's that push. It's fireworks. It's what makes the world go round. It's, I completely agree to everything. That's why, we opened the festival as a playground rather than a business battleground, for people to bring their joy, like joy alone and passion. You can lift a car, you can rip out a tree, you can make a mountain move if you are motivated. We're not, as we all know, not tapping into it like the vast majority of our brain capacities when we are on that autopilot sleeper mode. But when we are tapped and tuned in and in our passion zone, and then meet a like-minded person, to have each other's back and to do things together. And then now imagine that multiplied with a community that's in 180 countries. That's our partner. And the filmmakers from 60 countries next year, it will be 160 countries, it's multiplying with joy, with our passion themes. And I also want to say, you feel it when you sit in the screening rooms, and because we are not the producers of the festival, we are actually the directors. So we do the programming. We carefully put the movies together where we know it's not the filmmaker waiting until their movie comes. Oh, there it came, great. And then they leave the theater. But that everybody's going in there for an emotional journey of like-minded people who make similar movies about similar things, so they can all, be this group together afterwards and help each other, making more movies together. Yeah. Firm believer in everything you said. It's the recipe for everything, finding like-minded people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that example of kind of translating the math to this human element of how you've built the festival. And Sej, I'm wondering if you have anything to add to that.
What you said about emergence, I feel like we had so many of those moments, like, not infinite, finite, but like meeting you was a moment like that I would call that a moment of emergence, because what you did was you opened up a whole new world for us. Especially when I came to the Hollywood Climate Summit, I was like, oh my goodness, this whole world exists. And how do we bring this world together with our festival and make something that is so much more powerful? There were moments where there were people like Carole, Joyce introduced us, but, we had other people bringing in different people who had never heard of. And then next thing you know, you're on a call with someone who made this incredible film and very much wants to be a part of your film festival and bring something to the actors or bring something to the storytellers. And those were all these like very powerful moments of emergence, I would say, along the journey, where something beyond the imagination was happening.
The uplifting part, actually, the rocket fuel, that's the special sauce in the whole thing. And not like uplifting and making you happy, but literally catapulting you together in places that all of us didn't even know existed before.
I love that. Amazing. Thank you both so much. There's so much juicy bits of wisdom there to really embody to all across the different archetypes, the embodiment of it, the creative expression of it, the weaving of it, the networking of it, and even the dissecting of these different elements of what it's like to really bring forth something that has an uplifting energy to it. So thank you so much for using different storylines and examples that appeal to a wide variety of folks. And as we this out, I always like to end with one last question, which is also another example of both emergence and reciprocity, which is, I like to ask, what's something that you wish I would have asked? What did I miss? What is something you're dying to talk about? When I've given this question, I've gotten such a diverse variety of answers, whether it's, will you ask what I'm drinking right now, to things that have to do with projects, to bouncing back to other ideas. So think wide and broad, but is there anything that you would love to still talk about that we can bring into this conversation?
No, I just want to say that I'm guessing, Amber, you have an incredible community of people. And that's the community that I know I would love very, very much. I know we would love very, very much. So if there's anyone who wants to reach out to us for any reason, or they want to bring something, again, like use us as a platform, bring something to the table, it would be amazing to have them reach out to us. We're open, and we're for all the work that you're doing. So yeah.
Amazing. So in the show notes, we'll include wonderful information that will help reach out and connect with you guys. So thank you so much for that. Anabelle, anything for you?
I just want your audience to know that the festival is going live on the 20th with our online program. And then the actual live show program with all the screenings and panels and amazing events starts on July 25, goes until July 28. And it's open for everyone. And I highly, highly recommend, even if there are non-filmmakers among the listeners, this is a place really for everyone, because, the storytellers only reflect the stories they are being told, and that the world should listen to. So everybody matters that comes to this. And yeah, this festival also doesn't end on the 28th. It opens the very next season. So for all the filmmakers, with Sej's call to action, I want people to know this is an annual event, and contact us at any time, just as you heard Amber's story joining us, saying, hey, let's hop on a call. We are here. We're very open-minded. We are heart-led and supportive of everyone who wants to be part of the Uplift community.
Amazing. Thank you both so much, Sej and Anabelle. What an incredible conversation to add to our list of ongoing conversations that I'm excited to continue. And for you, the listener, I would love to see you in LA very shortly at the end of July. We will be there with hopefully all aglow and perhaps also running to the next thing that needs doing. But would love to connect with you and have a moment to share that could lead to an emergence yet to be found. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Earthmate. How did that episode resonate? Did it stretch you, inspire you, or perhaps irk you? I'm here for it, so please reach out. Besides the socials, we have a community to practice with on our website, eartharchetypes.com, where more Earth archetypes can guide your path and become dear friends. A great place to start is the quiz to discover your type. Oh, and on your way, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button. See you again soon.